I'm most afraid of wasting time, because I feel like I need to grow, or I need to look at every situation as if it's like a growth point. And if I feel like I'm wasting time, then I'm like, nothing happened. Like, what am I doing?
For me, I think when I'm afraid of making a big decision. For example, like changing a job or not. No.
I think this is like a typical one, but I was just telling Uju about it actually, because I just moved and I'm living in a basement now. And there's a lot of spiders and I'm not used to it. And I know that I'm bigger than them and I know they're afraid of me, but they are huge and they're gross and they move really fast. And I can kill one it took me 10 minutes to kill one the other night. And I was like red in the face and sweaty. And I had this giant box and I was like, and I got it. But the fact that it's like, you can still see most of it, this is really grotesque, but the fact that you can still see its body like sticking up, it's not like squished all the way. It's not okay to me. Like it needs to be gone. Like, so
Dang.
I would say that I've seen 4 different spiders since I moved here. Like they're different sizes and everything. So I'd say I'm really afraid of spiders, but I think I'm like developing a courage against it. And then I do have like a deep fear of like disappointing people, which I think is something that's difficult. But I have a hard time not wanting to people please, and I don't want to disappoint anybody ever, which is tough sometimes because you're going to disappoint people. So I think that's something I'm like really afraid of. But yeah.
Amy, I have the opposite position on spiders. I really like spiders because they kill every other bug. And when I see a spider, I'm like, we become friends. I'm like, oh, so you live here? And then all the other bugs in the house die.
Wow. Cool. I literally go, why do you exist? I know you're here for a reason, but I don't like you.
You can become friends with them. They'll respect you.
How spider kills bugs?
They make their webs.
Okay.
And then the bug comes in
and trap them.
There's also hunter-killer spiders, which are really fast.
Oh.
But in Taiwan, the spiders are probably bigger.
I'm afraid of. I think probably everyone's afraid of this, but dying a really painful death, or having something really painful happen and not dying. I think that's even worse. So it's just pain. I guess intense pain, and I've never experienced pain that would make me want to die so far. But if and when it does happen, I would prefer to die. But also, dying a painful death is terrible. So either way, just don't want to experience that intense pain. And I guess on a less like physical sense, I fear kind of similar to Amy, but less disappointing other people, but like disappointing myself. In like I disappoint myself all the time, of course, but like in bigger ways. Like, yeah, there are certain things that if I don't complete those things and I disappoint myself in that way, then it's so much worse. So disappointing myself and intense pain.
I'm afraid of relationships, actually. Like, I'm afraid of having a pet or a loved one or something else either change or become sick and pass away or just disappear suddenly. Like I've had pet cats and dogs, and like they suffer and then pass away somehow. And it's just, like the feeling inside, like I had this friend for a long time and now I don't, is like I'm afraid of that most.
The mule's problem, I feel like he had less of. I mean, the problem obviously is that he was going to be buried alive, but I think internally, like, he faced his problem. Like, he didn't really have a problem. The farmer had just given up. That was a different thing altogether. But the mule, he was like, no, I'm not going to give up. And I think, obviously, it's unfortunate to be put in a situation like that. And honestly, I was like, this isn't the kind of death I wouldn't want to die, but I would probably have surrendered to this death. So I'm like, this is a great mule. Like, I'm motivated by this mule to not give up in situations like that. And there's stories like of real people that, you know, have had to fight their way out of terrible situations. And that's the kind of attitude I should have. So the mule is definitely an inspiration to me.
That's the purpose of this story. This is like a motivational story, a proverb, even a modern proverb that is supposed to teach people to like persevere and fight for themselves, for their own good, because life is worth living or something. It has no basis in religion whatsoever. It's like, don't you want to be alive like the mule is? You can so easily fix yourself or something like that. So what was the farmer's problem? Oh man, think about the farmer. Don't you have any sympathy for this man who's got a well and a mule?
I think the farmer just has a weak character.
He didn't even try. He didn't even
Yeah,
try.
easy to give up.
There's another version of this story where the farmer's intention all along was to save the mule by pouring the dirt into the well. But the mule didn't understand that the farmer was actually helping him.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I read that one.
Oh.
But in this story, it makes the farmer's thoughts and judgment very bad. Like, I feel
like a well takes a long time to dig out too, like to build a successful well. And like there's a scripture where it talks about how in Proverbs it talks about how like you build a vineyard and then you let the walls die, and so everything comes into the vineyard, destroys it. And I was reading that like a vineyard takes like 5 years to actually like get to the point where it's really successful. And so it's like all this work for nothing. He's just like, oh, I'm gonna bury it.
I feel like because he's willing to get his friends to like shovel dirt into the well, but he doesn't like ask his friends to help him get the mule out of the well. So he like makes the effort of asking people to help him, but he's not in the way that like he could have. That's that story.
Yeah, I agree, because I think what I'm saying is the problem is his heart. Inside of him, he thinks negatively that, well, neither of us is worth of doing anything. So that's why he did it alone, like without asking help from other people. So if he's open, maybe he's also helpless, but at least if he's open about it, maybe someone can think of other good ideas to help him out.
Yeah, I think the farmer, I like what Amy said about the fact that he got his friends to just, essentially, I was thinking about this, and the farmer would be me in like my negativity, and then if like Amy and all my other friends just like helped me dig deeper into negativity, that's what like that situation would be. And instead of helping me turn things around, it would just be them, hey, I'm just gonna enable you to, bury yourself deeper, like kind of literally. So I think that's the unfortunate thing about the situation, that the friends didn't help him turn things around.
How about, we're talking about the farmer a lot. How about the last question? How did the mule decide to fix his problem? I think he's the real hero of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
He took lemons and made lemonade.
The other American expressions. If God gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Can we say mule decide to repent from anxious to have a hope,
Yeah.
Yeah, he did not give up.
I agree.
right?
I mean, generally we think of mule or donkeys to be stupid animal. So when I read this, I was going like, wait, who had an idea? The mule? The mule had the idea. It was just kind of, it caught me by surprise.
Yeah. Some
I think
personification of the.
I think the mule just turned crisis into an opportunity, right? So maybe we can learn from that. If something bad happens, it's not necessarily bad all the way, because depending on how we react, we can see that as opportunity to change.
Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. But David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it again to this pagan Philistine. For he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you.
I like how in this story, I don't think it's mentioned here, but before this, David is really upset that the Philistine is mocking God. And he's like, who's going to tell him to shut up? And no one's doing anything. And he's like, okay, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Just doing what is right.
Yeah, I think it's cool that David expects more, quickly from the second question. David expects more than anyone else. Like an abundant, like a really big response from God. And everyone else is like, no, surely this guy is going to murder all of us. And David's like, no, God is bigger than this person.
I like how David is basically being prepared by God, unknowingly being prepared for this bigger challenge, because he was just doing his job, and God was like, I'm just going to, help you get past these terrible things so you can do your job, and then eventually it's going to help you with this bigger task. Your faith in me will, God just proving faithful to David his whole life as being while he's a shepherd, and then once there's a bigger issue, David continues to have faith in God because he's proven himself faithful, and now he's able to face this much greater challenge. And so I think that's what the other people may not have experienced God in the same way that David had, and so they have less faith.
I think it's cool that in both stories, the object of fear becomes like the tool for victory. It's like in the mule story, the dirt, like anyone is in that situation, the dirt is going to be like their God in that moment. They're going to be like so afraid of it because it's going to kill them. But the mule had the understanding to be like, oh wait, this is actually a way out. And then in David and Goliath, it was clear that the Israelites viewed him as like this imposing, scary man who was just murdering people left and right. And they saw him as like a God figure. And David compared him to the beasts. And he's like, he's just like the lion I killed, like no big deal. And he went up and, he kind of rejected the narrative of what everyone else was thinking. And so it's just cool. It's inspiring to see how we don't have to accept what the world says is very scary or powerful when we believe in God.
Courage is when you can act in dangerous, painful, or fearful situations. I think courage is very much about actions. The times when the mule was courageous was when he stopped being fearful and terrified and started to shake off the dirt. I think courage is so useful too. With the mule, the story is more about persistence. The story is more about saving itself. But I think especially David's story, the courage there is to fight for God and a little bit to help the people around him in the armies. Who can be courageous, or how do you start becoming courageous? I think there are smaller situations where you can practice. Sometimes people feel that waking up and going to work is courage. And I don't look down on that. I don't feel like that's bad or like wimpy or something. I think if someone really feels that way, then they are courageous. Or I also really adore the part in David and Goliath's story that David had the focus on the important part about being close to God, being someone who would fight for God. Right. Sticking to the plan is important to be able to act when we need to.
I think this is super applicable for me right now because grad school feels like...
Oh man, grad school is totally Goliath.
Heaps of dirt. I really am relating to this mule story. Yeah, I am simultaneously the mule and the farmer. I'm like heaping dirt on myself. So I think that it's just going to be about taking it one step at a time, as the mule did, and realizing that God has gotten me through so many things in the past, and really just taking that assurance that God will get me through this because he's done it before, and then just moving forward one step at a time. Yeah, it's tough to do that in the moment though, because I'm just thinking about all of the assignment. The next 3 years, like every time I say 3 years, I like want to cry. So I'm like, what have I done? But yeah, taking it 1 week at a time, 1 day at a time, one assignment at a time.
Yeah, I think for me it's similar to Uju because my situation is very odd. I feel like it's a unique situation right now. I just got a part-time job, thank God, but I'm also making 1/5 of what I made at my last job. So it's like, it's definitely humbling. But I think it's just the courage to wait on God's timing. And it's good because my campus or the minister at my church, we got time and he was like, hey, you should treat your time here while you're waiting as like a 1 semester challenge. So he's like, I'm going to be training you and kind of getting you more prepared. And he said that if the door opens, I'll be the first one to help you pack. He says, even if it's a window that opens. And so it's just been hard because I'm like, man, God, there's a realistic event where, the door could never open. And, what happened, like I said, my fear of wasting time, like what happens then? But I think, courage is acting on, is kind of like putting the ball in God's court where I'm like, I'm going to do everything I can and trust that you'll move. And if you don't, I'll know. So that's been difficult, but I really feel that God responds to courage.